Why did pretending not to know my husband's best friend destroy everything? How did a single lie at a dinner party unravel years of trust, expose an affair, and lead to a lawful public ending I never saw coming? When he finally looked at me with proof in his hand, I couldn't even remember what version of my story I'd been telling. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Calla, and I swear it all started as a tiny lie meant to save me. You know when you say something quick to avoid a scene, and it snowballs into something you can't take back? That was me. One night, I acted like I barely knew my husband's friend, just to hide how well I really did. It was supposed to be harmless, a little performance to keep peace, to keep control. But somehow that lie turned into the spark that burned down my marriage. Evan looked at me across the dinner table with that calm, unreadable face, and I told myself he believed me. I even laughed about it later, said he was overthinking, too serious, too proud. What I didn't realize was that his silence wasn't confusion, it was planning. While I kept talking, spinning new versions of my truth for friends and family, he was quietly collecting facts. The day those papers landed in my hands, in front of everyone, I understood what real exposure felt like. People think cheating ruins love. It's not the cheating, it's the lie you build to hide it, and the man who finally decides not to play along. The night everything began, the sky looked ordinary enough to lie under. I remember staring through the restaurant's glass railing, the lights from the city glittering below like excuses I hadn't told yet. It was one of those rooftop places Ryan liked. Loud music, slow service, and too many people pretending to be important. Evan had picked it to celebrate Ryan's promotion. I thought that was ironic, considering what Ryan and I were already hiding. When Evan raised his glass, I smiled too brightly. The table was full, friends from work, a few spouses, my sister Jessa beside me, whispering gossip. Ryan sat across, careful not to meet my eyes. I thought I looked composed. But when Evan said, "Calla, you remember Ryan, right?" I laughed like a bad actress and said, "Oh, yes, of course, from that thing at your office." I could feel the stiffness in Ryan's shoulders from across the table. My lie dropped between us like a coin no one wanted to pick up. Jessa nudged me under the table, amused. She loved how easily I could spin things. Evan didn't. He tilted his head slightly, that small engineer's habit he had when something didn't add up. But he let it go, at least out loud. The conversation drifted, work talk, vacation plans, wine refills. I kept performing, leaning into the glow of laughter, pretending Ryan was a stranger who just happened to be at our table. Every time our eyes met, my pulse jumped. I thought everyone could see it, the invisible thread between us, but no one was paying attention, not yet. Later, when dessert came, Ryan made a small joke about how Evan used to be the only one who could beat him at chess. It was harmless, but Evan's face flickered. He looked at me, then back at Ryan, then said quietly, "You two must have played a lot." I could feel my throat tighten. I took a sip of wine that tasted like vinegar and said, "He's just being polite, don't overthink it." Evan didn't respond. He just smiled that slow, unreadable smile he uses when he's filing something away. That was his trick, never arguing right away, just collecting. When we left the restaurant, the wind was cold against my legs. Evan held the door for me, polite as ever, and I hated that politeness because it meant he'd already decided something. In the elevator, he asked softly, "So you don't really know Ryan outside work?" I forced a laugh. "Why would you even ask that?" He shrugged. "You seemed nervous." "I wasn't nervous. You're imagining things." The air between us felt heavier than the elevator's walls. He didn't push, just nodded, as if to say, "Fine, I'll let the numbers speak later." At home, the kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. 2 mugs on opposite counters, his washed, mine half finished. I noticed his phone screen light up on the table. A calendar reminder, 10:15 a.m., downtown. No title. Evan never scheduled things that precisely. I almost asked about it, but my stomach twisted, and I told myself it was nothing. When I went to bed, he stayed up, typing quietly in the living room. I heard the soft click of keys, the occasional sigh, the scrape of his chair. It didn't sound angry. It sounded methodical. I told myself he was working. He always worked too much. I woke around midnight to the faint hum of the printer. A single page slid out, face down. When I walked closer, it was blank. He'd fallen asleep on the couch, computer still open but screen dark. I picked up the paper, flipped it, saw nothing, and felt silly for even checking, but something about the smell of toner stayed with me. The next morning, he was already gone. His side of the bed smooth, untouched. On the counter, he'd left my keys and a sticky note that just said, "Have a good day." It looked normal, except the handwriting was smaller, tighter. At work, Ryan texted, "Did he buy it?" I deleted the message immediately, then wrote back, "Don't text me during the day." He sent one more. "You looked beautiful last night." I didn't reply. My heart still raced from Evan's tone in the elevator. I told myself I was being paranoid. He didn't know anything. He couldn't. At lunch, Jessa called. She said, "You were acting weird last night. What was that thing with Ryan?" "Nothing," I said. "You know Evan, he reads into every tiny look." She laughed. "You mean he notices stuff? Maybe don't flirt with his friend next time." I wasn't flirting. "Sure," she said, stretching the word until it stung. "You do realize everyone could tell he likes you, right?" I hung up before I said something stupid. That night, Evan came home later than usual. I pretended to scroll through my phone on the couch while he made himself tea. He didn't mention dinner, didn't ask about my day. He just moved around the kitchen in silence. I hated the quiet. Finally, I said, "You're mad at me." He looked over. "Should I be?" "It was a dinner. You're acting like I cheated on you or something." His expression didn't change. "Did you?" The cup slipped in my hand, tea spilling over my fingers. I hissed and grabbed a towel. "You're ridiculous." He nodded once. "Maybe." When he walked away, I felt this strange chill, like the air had already decided to leave before I did. I spent the next few nights pretending nothing was wrong. I joked with coworkers, posted pictures of coffee, told Jessa we were fine, but little things kept happening. A folder on the desk labeled Utilities. His laptop left open with a spreadsheet I didn't understand. My phone lighting up with a missed call, unknown number. He stopped touching me altogether, and I told myself it was temporary. Men sulk, they cool off, they come back. I told Ryan that too when he started to panic. He said, "If he finds out, we're done." I said, "He won't. Trust me." But when I came home that Friday, the guest bed was made up. His clothes were split, half in the closet, half gone. The nightstand was empty except for a folded piece of paper that said Archive A. I stared at it, confused. I heard his car in the driveway, then the sound of the garage door closing. He came in, calm, holding groceries. I asked where he'd been. He said, "Just errands." I asked why the closet looked different. He said, "Trying to make space." "For what?" He met my eyes then. "For what's coming." I laughed too loud. "What's that supposed to mean?" He smiled faintly. "You'll see." That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt suspicious. The hum of the fridge, the soft buzz of his phone, when a message came through labeled with only an emoji. I picked it up when he went to brush his teeth, opened the screen, and saw a thread titled Follow Up. Inside were short, tidy messages, dates, times, file confirmations, no names. When I put the phone down, my hands were shaking. He came out, towel around his neck, and looked at me for a long time. "Everything okay?" he asked. Of course, I said. He nodded. Good. Then he turned off the light. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe. It was slow, steady, unreadable. The kind of calm that comes before a storm, no one admits is real. By morning, he was gone again. The calendar on the fridge now had another entry, downtown 10:15 a.m., underlined twice. I almost erased it, then stopped myself. Some part of me knew better. I thought I could outtalk him. I thought I could spin every truth until it sounded harmless. But the silence that followed me through that day was louder than anything I'd said. And for the first time, I wondered if the lie I'd told to protect myself had already become the only thing he believed. The next morning started with the soft whir of the coffee machine and the silence that used to feel peaceful, but now made my skin itch. Evan was at the table, scrolling through something on his tablet. He didn't look up when I said good morning, just murmured something that sounded polite but distant. I watched the steam from his mug rise between us like a wall. I wanted to reach across it, break it somehow, but pride kept my hands in my lap. Ryan had texted again before sunrise. Are you okay? He'd written. Then a follow-up. He's not saying anything to me either. I deleted both messages before Evan could see them. Even the sound of my phone buzzing made me jump now. By the time I reached work, my heart was already thudding from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. The office smelled like paper and old carpet cleaner. Ryan's desk was 2 rows away from mine, far enough to pretend distance but close enough for small mistakes. When I walked past, he didn't look up, which made me grateful and furious at the same time. During lunch, our coworker Amelia called me over to look at something on her screen. It was a photo someone had posted from the client dinner last week. I was in it, laughing, leaning slightly toward Ryan, his hand resting on the back of my chair. It looked innocent enough to most people, but I could already feel Evan's eyes seeing through it. Oh my God, you guys look like a power duo, Amelia said. Tag him so people know who's behind that campaign. I forced a small laugh. I don't think that's necessary. Too late. Someone else tagged us both. Within an hour, the photo had spread through our office group chat, comments pouring in, half compliments, half jokes. I could already imagine Jessa seeing it and saying something careless. When I got home that night, Evan was sitting in the living room, laptop open, the glow of the screen painting his face pale. I tried to sound casual. How was your day? He said. Fine. Long. Anything interesting? Depends what you mean by interesting. That tone, it wasn't sharp, just even, like he was reading lines from a script he'd rehearsed. I dropped my bag by the couch. You're being weird. He looked at me then, really looked, eyes calm but searching. Am I? Yes, it's like you're waiting for me to confess to something. He didn't answer. He just closed the laptop slowly, placed it on the table and said, Dinner's in the fridge. Then he stood, stretched and went upstairs. I stared at the dark screen for a long time. My reflection looked older, tired, guilty. I told myself he'd just had a hard week. That's what I told Jessa when she called later, her voice full of curiosity. He's probably stressed, I said. He's always like this when work gets heavy. She laughed softly. Calla, I love you, but the man looks like he's plotting an escape. Did you see his face in that photo online? What photo? I asked too quickly. The one of you and Ryan. It's everywhere. He's tagged in the comments. I hung up before she could say more. My hands were shaking as I opened the post. There it was, my laugh frozen mid-air, Ryan's hand too close, Evan's profile faintly visible in the background like a ghost. That night, I couldn't eat. I poured wine and scrolled through the comments again and again until my phone slipped from my hand. Evan came downstairs around 11. He glanced at the glass, then at me. You should get some sleep, I snapped. You could at least pretend to care. He didn't rise to it. I do care. That's why I'm quiet. What's that supposed to mean? Noise hides the truth. You like noise. I wanted to throw something at him, shake him, make him yell. Instead, I just said, You're not making sense. He smiled faintly. I know. Then he went back upstairs. Around midnight, I heard the faint hum again. The printer, a quiet mechanical sigh from the study. When I peeked in, a single page rested on the tray. I turned it over, blank again. The air smelled faintly of toner. The wastebasket was empty. He'd started cleaning things more often, deleting files, moving paper stacks. His side of the desk looked sterile. Mine was still chaos. By the weekend, people at work were whispering. Ryan avoided me completely now, but that only made it worse. The distance between us looked like guilt. Amelia asked if we'd had a fight. I said, "We're just busy." When I came home Friday evening, the house was spotless. Evan was in the garage, sorting boxes. "You're nesting or moving out," I joked. He didn't look up. "Just organizing." "For what?" "Future clarity." I laughed like it was a joke. "You sound like a spreadsheet," he said, better than sounding like a rumor. That one stung. "You think I'm lying?" "I think you lie to yourself," he said gently, like he was stating a fact instead of accusing me. Then he carried a box past me labeled bank. The following week, my manager called me into her office. She said, "Evan stopped by today. Dropped off your lunch." Sweet man. My blood ran cold. I hadn't told him where I worked that day. He must have looked it up, maybe checked my calendar. When I got home that evening, the fridge had a note on it. Leftovers on the top shelf. "Hope you ate lunch today." It looked like care, but it felt like surveillance. I started keeping my phone face down, deleting messages the moment they came. Ryan wanted to meet, to talk, but I couldn't risk it. One mistake, and Evan would know. Jessa came over unannounced that Sunday, full of opinions. "You're acting like a fugitive," she said, lounging on the couch. "You either tell him or end it. You're too obvious." I snapped that she didn't understand, that Evan had this way of knowing things before anyone told him. She smirked. "Maybe he's just smarter than you think." Evan came home halfway through her lecture. He greeted her politely, offered tea, then went upstairs without another word. Jessa watched him disappear, then turned to me. "He's calm. I hate calm men. They always come back with proof." After she left, I walked into the guest room. His desk was neat again, drawers locked. A small light blinked on the router. Upload in progress. I stood there until it stopped. The next morning, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face looked unfamiliar, tighter around the mouth, like someone permanently holding her breath. Evan was brushing his teeth beside me, quiet. When he spit and rinsed, he said, "You've been deleting things on your phone." I froze. "What?" I noticed. "Noticed how?" He shrugged. "Patterns change. I see patterns for a living." I felt heat rise to my face. "You're invading my privacy." He met my eyes in the mirror. "You gave it away." He left for work soon after, leaving his mug spotless again on the counter. When I picked it up, there was no lipstick mark, no trace of life. By lunchtime, I couldn't focus. Ryan texted, "We need to talk. He's been asking questions at work." "Ignore him," I wrote back. "He won't find anything." But I didn't believe it. That evening, Evan came home early. He set a small folder on the counter, unlabeled. "You had a call from your mother," he said. "I told her you were resting." I said, "You answered my phone." He said, "You left it unlocked." I tried to sound calm. "You're scaring me." "No," he said softly. "You're scared because you've run out of versions." He walked away, leaving the folder untouched. I waited until I heard water running upstairs before I opened it. Inside were printouts, screenshots, timestamps, bank notifications showing lunches, Ubers, hotel check-ins, my own messages with Ryan. Nothing explicit, but enough. I dropped the folder back where it was and went upstairs. Evan was brushing Theo's hair for bed, his expression steady, gentle. He looked at me and said, "Say goodnight properly." I kissed my son's forehead, my voice shaking. When I turned to leave, Evan added, "We'll talk tomorrow. I've got a meeting downtown in the morning." I nodded, pretending not to understand what he meant. In bed that night, I stared at the ceiling again, counting each breath like it might reset the truth. But deep down, I knew the quiet wasn't peace anymore. It was preparation, and I had already run out of ways to talk over it. Marion's birthday dinner should have been simple. A family thing. Nice restaurant, polite laughter, gifts she'd already hinted about 3 times. Instead, it became the night every pair of eyes in that room started to see me differently. The restaurant was bright, full of mirrors and gold light that made everyone look honest even when they weren't. Evan insisted we come early to help set up, which was his way of making sure everything ran smoothly. He was always like that, organized, calm, impossible to argue with. I wore a navy dress that hugged the places I still liked about myself. Jessa said it made me look strategic, which was her version of a compliment. Ryan and his wife were there too. I hadn't expected her. She sat next to him, smiling too much, resting her hand on his arm, as if claiming him for display. I told myself I didn't care. I smiled across the table and said hi like we'd barely met, the same fake innocence I'd practiced. Evan watched the entire exchange like he was timing it with a stopwatch. Dinner began slow. Marion told stories, the kind she repeated every year. The time Evan fixed her fence at 16, how he'd once saved a neighbor's dog. Everyone adored him, and I played along, smiling when they said we made the perfect pair. I wanted to scream at them that perfection was exhausting. When the waiter poured wine, Jessa leaned close and whispered, "You're wound up. Breathe." "I'm fine," I said, maybe too sharply. Ryan laughed at something his wife said, a laugh I'd once thought belonged to me. I forced my focus back on Marion's toast. She thanked everyone, mentioned how grateful she was to have a stable family she could count on. That word, stable, made me flinch. After dessert, conversation turned casual. Someone asked about work, and Ryan mentioned a project Evan and I had both contributed to once. "Calla practically ran the marketing side," he said. I smiled politely. "You give me too much credit." Evan's voice was light, almost playful. "I didn't know you two worked that closely." Ryan hesitated, then said, "Just a few crossover meetings." "Right," I added quickly. "It was ages ago." Evan smiled, not at me, but at his water glass. Funny how I never heard about it. The table went quiet for half a second. Marion asked if anyone wanted more cake. Jessa tried to change the subject, asking about a new show she'd been watching, but the tension had already landed. I could feel it, a subtle shift in air, I said too loudly. Evan likes to pretend I keep secrets just so he can feel important. He looked up. Pretend? I realized too late how that sounded. Everyone was watching. Even Theo, sitting beside Marion, looked confused. "You know what I mean," I said. "You get jealous over nothing." He didn't move, didn't raise his voice. He just nodded, like he'd been waiting for me to say it. "Nothing," he repeated softly. "Right." Ryan's wife excused herself to the restroom. He followed a few minutes later. Jessa whispered, "You should stop talking now." But I couldn't. I'd started, and the silence was unbearable. "It's exhausting being questioned all the time," I said, even though no one had asked me anything. "I'm not the one acting strange." Evan folded his napkin neatly. "Strange how?" "You know how," I snapped. "The locked drawers, the files, the secret calls. If you have something to say, just say it." He looked at me evenly. "Would you like me to here?" The way he said it, calm, public, made my stomach flip. "You're unbelievable." I laughed to lighten the mood. He thinks I'm some kind of spy. A few people chuckled awkwardly, unsure whose side to take. Marion looked at Evan, worried. He said, "I'm fine," and smiled at her. "Everything's fine." But nothing was fine. When Ryan and his wife came back, the air felt heavier. She had red eyes. I didn't ask why. Evan checked his watch, then asked for the bill. In the parking lot, Jessa pulled me aside. "You have to fix this," she said. "He's twisting things," I whispered. "He's making me look guilty." "Calla, you are guilty," she said quietly. "At least a little." I told her to stop judging me, but she just sighed. "He's too calm. That's worse than angry." Evan unlocked the car. I slid in, folded my arms and stared out the window. Halfway home I said, "You embarrassed me." He said, "I didn't say anything." "Exactly. That's worse. You sat there letting everyone think something was wrong." He drove silently, eyes fixed ahead. The streetlights flickered across his face like frames of evidence. When we got home, I slammed my purse on the counter. "Are you even going to explain what this is? The notes, the meetings, whatever it is you're doing behind my back?" He took off his jacket, hung it up, and said, "I'm organizing information." "About what?" "About patterns." I laughed bitterly. "You sound insane." "Maybe," he said, picking up his tablet, "but data doesn't lie." I wanted to scream, but Theo's door creaked upstairs, so I bit my tongue. Evan walked past me to the study, shutting the door quietly. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, already dressed, tie perfect. A new calendar note glowed on his phone. Meeting, personal. I poured coffee, trying to act unfazed. "Going somewhere?" I asked. He nodded. "Downtown." "For what?" "Just follow up." That word again. I hated it. At work, everyone was still whispering about the dinner. Amelia told me she'd seen a photo online. Someone had posted a group shot from last night. In it, I was mid-sentence, Evan staring at me like he already knew everything. By afternoon, Ryan came to my desk. "We need to talk." "Not here," I hissed. "Then tonight." "I can't." "Calla, he's asking questions. About me." I swallowed hard. "He's bluffing." "He's not." Ryan's voice dropped. "He came by my office, said he needed a reference for a project, but he asked when we first met." My mouth went dry. "What did you say?" "I said last year, you'd better make sure your story matches." I could barely breathe for the rest of the day. I told my manager I felt sick and left early. When I got home, the house was silent again. On the kitchen counter sat a flash drive next to a folded note that read, "Archive B." I didn't touch it. I poured a drink instead. Hours later, Evan came home. He saw the untouched drive and smiled faintly. "You didn't open it." "Should I?" He poured himself water. "Eventually." I felt tears sting my eyes. "Why are you doing this? What are you trying to prove?" "That truth can survive without noise," he said. "You're punishing me for nothing." He turned off the kitchen light. "If it's nothing, it won't hurt." That night, I lay awake listening to the rain start against the windows. Around midnight, headlights swept across the wall, Ryan's car. I slipped out of bed, met him by the back fence, the rain cold against my skin. He looked panicked. "You have to tell him before I do. He's building something. He's got timestamps, locations. He showed me messages." My chest felt hollow. "He's bluffing. Calla, he has everything." We stood there, drenched and shaking, and I realized Evan was watching from the upstairs window. He didn't move, didn't yell, just watched. When I came back inside, the study light was on. The printer beeped once, like a heartbeat in the dark. I closed the door and pretended not to see the paper sliding out, crisp and silent. The next morning, his car was gone, and a new entry glowed on the fridge calendar, underlined twice in his neat handwriting, "Downtown 9:25. I poured coffee with trembling hands, telling myself it was fine, that he'd calm down, that everything could still be fixed. But the smell of toner still hung in the air, faint and steady, like proof I couldn't burn away. The guest room became his side of the house. It wasn't said aloud, but it was clear. The door stayed half closed, the bed perfectly made, his shoes lined like a quiet barricade. At first, I kept pretending it was temporary, that he'd come back to our room once the air cleared. Then a week passed, then 2. The line of mugs on opposite counters became a pattern. His spotless, mine half full, lipstick faded to a ring. One evening, Theo wandered in holding his toy car. "Why does Daddy sleep in there now?" he asked. I said Daddy had work that needed quiet. He nodded, too young to doubt me, and went back to his room. My throat tightened. I didn't tell Evan the question, and he didn't ask. Most nights he worked behind the guest room door. I'd hear the low hum of his computer, the occasional click of a drawer lock. Once, when I brought laundry, the printer started spitting out blank pages again. I laughed nervously and asked if it was broken. He said, "Just clearing space." The calm in his voice felt heavier than anger. Jessa came over one Saturday, bursting through the door with takeout. "You're living like a ghost," she said, eyeing the tidy counters and separate mugs. "You need to talk to him or torch the whole thing." I poured her wine and said, "He's not giving me anything to work with. He just observes." "Observes?" She snorted. "That's creepier than fighting." "He says he's sorting things," I muttered. "Information, patterns." Jessa tilted her head. "Then maybe you should make your pattern look innocent." She left early, muttering that the house gave her chills. I almost laughed because she wasn't wrong. Even the air felt disinfected of emotion. The next morning, Evan sat at the table reading something printed. I asked if he'd be home for dinner. He said, "Maybe." "Can you give me a real answer for once?" I said. He looked up. A real answer requires a real question. I hated when he said things like that, so calm they sounded like riddles. "I asked you a question." He folded the paper. "Then the answer is no." I slammed my cup down. "You're doing this on purpose, trying to make me look crazy." He took a slow sip of coffee. "You're managing that on your own." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "You think you're smarter than everyone." He stood, rinsed his mug, and said, "I just listen." Then he walked out, leaving the faint scent of detergent behind. That afternoon, I opened his desk drawer while he was gone. It was locked, but the key was taped under a folder labeled Taxes. Inside were folders labeled Household, Utilities, Bank, and another that just said Archive A. Each one was immaculate. Receipts, printouts, dates. I didn't understand half of it, but one sheet caught my eye. A photo of the restaurant dinner. Me mid-laugh, Ryan blurred behind me. The caption underneath in tiny writing. Timeline confirmed. I shoved it back, locked the drawer, and sat on the floor, shaking. I told myself he couldn't use it for anything real. It was just paper, a hobby. But that night, when he came home, he looked at me like he already knew I'd seen everything. "How was your day?" he asked mildly. "Fine." "Anything new?" "No." "Good." He smiled slightly. "I like consistency." After he went to bed, I sat in the dark living room scrolling through my phone. Ryan had sent another message. He knows. "We need to talk." I deleted it without replying, but my fingers trembled so much I nearly dropped the phone. By morning, Evan was already gone again. His calendar app was open on the counter, an alert flashing. Meeting. Personal. I almost deleted it out of spite, then thought better of it. At work, Ryan cornered me in the hallway. "He's building a case, Calla." "You're paranoid." He showed me screenshots, emails, even my time cards. He said he just wanted accuracy. I laughed, brittle. Then let him collect accuracy. We didn't do anything illegal. Ryan grabbed my arm lightly. "He doesn't need illegal. He just needs enough." That night, when I came home, Evan was fixing Theo's bike chain in the driveway. The smell of grease and calm filled the air. I stood watching him, unsure if I should join. He said without turning, "It's not broken, just needed adjustment." "Like us?" I tried to joke. He straightened. "If that's what you call it." Inside, I poured wine and turned on the TV just to fill the silence. Theo played on the rug while Evan packed up his tools. We looked like a normal family from the outside, except our voices never overlapped. After Theo went to bed, I tried again. "Can we talk?" He leaned against the counter. "We are." "You know what I mean." He waited. "I hate this distance," I said. "You're punishing me for no reason." He said, "There's always a reason." "I told you there's nothing going on with Ryan." His eyes didn't blink. "Then why did you delete the messages?" I froze. He turned toward the hallway. "Exactly." He walked away before I could reply, closing the guest room door behind him. The soft click of the lock felt final. I sat there staring at the empty wine glass. Every lie I'd told had started with that same sound. A door closing, a lock turning. The next morning, Marian stopped by unannounced, bringing cookies for Theo. She looked around the spotless kitchen and frowned. "You two aren't talking much, are you?" I forced a smile. "We're fine." She nodded slowly. "When Evan gets quiet, he's already decided something. Just remember that." After she left, I sat at the table, picking at the cookie until it crumbled. The clock ticked too loud. Evan came home around 8, loosened his tie and said, "I'm going to be out early tomorrow." "For what?" "Follow-up." I laughed weakly. "Another one?" "You make it sound like a medical procedure." He didn't answer. He opened the fridge, took out his lunch container, and checked the seal like someone inspecting evidence. "Are you recording me or something?" I snapped. He closed the lid. "You record yourself every time you lie." That night, I heard the soft beep of his phone through the wall, then the muffled voice of someone on speaker. I couldn't make out the words, just a calm tone, like business. I lay awake until dawn. When he left, I checked the guest room again. Everything was cleaner than before. Only one thing on the desk, a single USB labeled by date. I slid it into my laptop. The screen lit up with folders titled Bank Statements, Messages, Photos. I clicked one. There I was, standing by the back fence in the rain with Ryan, faces barely visible but close enough to recognize. My lungs seized. I yanked the drive out, shoved it into the drawer and slammed it shut. My phone buzzed immediately. A text from Evan. "Don't break the chain of evidence." I almost screamed. He was testing me, watching, maybe through cameras, maybe just intuition. Either way, he knew. Theo padded into the room, rubbing his eyes. "Mummy, can we have pancakes?" I forced a smile. "Of course." As I flipped the batter, I kept glancing at the locked door down the hall. The air smelled like coffee and dread. That night, after Theo fell asleep, Evan sat across from me at the kitchen table. "We can stop pretending soon," he said. "Pretending what?" He looked tired, almost kind. "That I don't know." I whispered, "What are you going to do?" He said, "Handle it properly." The way he said properly made my heart drop. Calm, final, like a closing statement. He stood, rinsed his mug, and walked toward the guest room. I followed, but the door closed before I reached it. I pressed my forehead against the wood, whispering, "Evan, please. We can fix this." No reply, just the faint click of a drawer locking again. The printer started up seconds later, whirring softly in the dark. I backed away, trembling, until the sound stopped and silence filled the hall like smoke. When I woke before dawn, his side of the house was empty. The fridge calendar had a new entry, neat as ever. Downtown 10:45 a.m. Under it, in smaller letters, final step. I stared until the words blurred, realizing I no longer knew which part of the lie I was living in, and which part he was quietly, perfectly documenting for the end. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a waiting room. Clean, quiet, temporary. Every sound seemed rehearsed. The faucet drip, the hum of the fridge, the soft shuffle of his shoes down the hall. Evan had stopped asking where I went, but that didn't mean he didn't know. The silence felt heavier than questions ever had. I told myself to act normal. Make breakfast. pack Theo's school bag, smile. But even my reflection looked like it had stopped believing me. I saw it in the way Evan moved around the kitchen, methodical, precise, like a man measuring distance he'd already accepted. One night, I tried to end the tension with a lie wrapped as truth. "I think we need counseling," I said. He looked up from his laptop. "We already are." "What does that mean?" He didn't answer right away. He closed the lid, leaned back, and said, "Every conversation is a session. You just talk to hear yourself. I listened to learn what's next." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "You make everything sound like a science experiment." "It's the only way to survive confusion," he said. "Structure. Structure doesn't fix love." He looked at me for a long time. "No, it just protects people from it when love turns dishonest." That night, I lay awake listening to him type. I didn't even try to sleep. Around midnight, I heard the faint buzz of his phone, a single message alert. Then silence again. The next day, Jessa showed up uninvited, wearing her judgment like perfume. "You look awful," she said, setting down a coffee. "You need to stop pretending this isn't happening." I rolled my eyes. "He's being dramatic. He'll calm down." "Calla, he's not dramatic. He's calculated. You do realize that, right?" I said nothing. "He's not yelling because he's building something. Men like him always do it quietly. You think silence means forgiveness, but it's paperwork." I laughed, trying to shake her words off. "You're watching too many true crime shows." She leaned closer. "When he said he'd handle it properly, what did he mean?" I hesitated. "He didn't say." Jessa sighed. "Then maybe start asking before someone else does." When she left, I stood by the window, watching her car disappear. The street outside looked normal. Neighbors walking dogs, kids on bikes. Everything normal but me. That evening, Evan came home early. He didn't say hello. He placed his keys on the counter, looked at me, and asked, "Do you still think honesty matters?" "Of course," I said cautiously. "Even when it hurts you." I tried to smile. "You sound like a therapist." "I met with one this morning," he said simply. My breath caught. "For what?" He shrugged. "To understand process. They're good with details." I stared at him. "You're joking." He poured himself water, calm as always. "No, I told you I'm handling things properly." "Properly?" My voice rose. "This is our marriage, not a spreadsheet." "That's the problem," he said. "You think everything emotional makes it real, but truth has to hold up outside feelings." "You're twisting everything," I said. "You're punishing me for being human." He looked up, his expression unreadable. "I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself." He walked past me into the guest room. The click of the door closing was softer this time, but it still made my chest tighten. When I woke the next morning, he was gone again. The kitchen clock read 7:42, but his side of the counter was spotless. A new calendar alert on the fridge said, "Paper drop, 9:30 a.m. Paper drop. My stomach turned. I called Jessa, but she didn't answer. I paced the kitchen, checked my phone, checked it again. Ryan had texted too. He called me this morning, said he doesn't want trouble, just facts. I typed, "Do not talk to him again," but deleted it before sending. There was no version of this where silence saved me anymore. When Evan came home that night, Theo was drawing at the table. I watched him kneel beside our son, showing him how to stay inside the lines. His voice was soft, steady. I'd forgotten how gentle he could sound when he wasn't looking at me. After Theo went to bed, I tried to start a conversation. "We can fix this," I said. "You don't need to turn it into paperwork." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "You think fixing means pretending. I think fixing means acknowledgement. I already said I'm sorry." He looked at me, finally meeting my eyes. "You're sorry for the fallout, not the act. That's not fair." "It's accurate." I stepped closer. "Do you even want to save this marriage?" He studied me for a moment, then said quietly, "No, I want to end it cleanly. I froze. You don't mean that. He smiled faintly, but his eyes didn't change. I told you I'd handle it properly. The word hung in the air like a verdict. He turned away, shutting off the kitchen light, leaving me standing in the dark. The following week was unbearable. He spoke only in necessary sentences, about Theo's school, bills, groceries, nothing personal, nothing human. One night, I walked into the guest room without knocking. "I'm not your enemy," I said. He didn't look up from his laptop. "Then stop acting like one. You're tearing this family apart." "No," he said evenly. "You already did. I'm just documenting the timeline." "What timeline?" He looked up then, tired but calm. "The one that shows when truth stopped meaning anything to you." I wanted to grab his laptop, throw it, break the quiet precision he wrapped himself in. Instead, I whispered, "You're cruel." He said, "No, I'm careful." That night, I drank wine until the walls blurred. I wanted to text Ryan, tell him everything was falling apart, that we'd been caught. But even that felt useless. Evan had made sure every exit was sealed. The next morning, I woke to find a small stack of folded clothes on my side of the bed. On top was a note. "For when you move out, I've arranged the rest." I sat there staring at it, half expecting him to walk in and say it was a test, but he didn't. Jessa came over again that afternoon, pale and tight-lipped. "He talked to a lawyer," she said. "Marion told me." I felt my heart drop. "What did he say?" "Nothing to her, just that he's preparing." I laughed weakly. He wouldn't go that far. "Calla, he's been gone all day with folders. He's serious." I pressed my hands to my face. I just need to talk to him before he does something stupid. That evening, I waited for him in the kitchen. When he walked in, I said, "We're not doing this through lawyers. We're adults. We can talk." He set his keys down, calm as ever. "I've talked enough." "Evan, please." "I'm not angry," he said. "I'm finished." I stepped forward. "Finished with what?" "With guessing who I'm married to." I felt my throat close. I made a mistake. I thought I could manage it, but it went too far. You can't throw everything away over... He interrupted, his voice quiet but final. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm putting things where they belong." "What does that mean?" He slipped his jacket over his arm. "It means there's a process. It starts tomorrow." "Process?" "Proper handling," he said simply, "for everyone's safety." He turned to leave. I caught his sleeve, desperate. "Please, Evan, don't do this." He looked down at my hand, then back up. "You wanted control. Now you get order instead." He walked out, closing the door softly behind him. The last thing I saw through the window was his car reversing down the driveway, taillights glowing red against the dark street. I stood there for a long time, listening to the echo of his calm voice in my head. Properly. The word didn't sound like a threat anymore. It sounded like a countdown. The community hall buzzed with voices, the kind of polite noise that hides tension. I came because Marion said it was a neighborhood event, nothing formal. When I saw Evan across the lobby in a navy suit, I thought maybe he'd changed his mind, that he wanted to talk. He didn't wave. He just nodded to a man beside him holding a clipboard. Then the courier approached me. "Calla Merowyn?" he asked. Everyone turned. I said yes before I understood. He handed me an envelope thick enough to feel final. Inside, my name printed beside his. Petition for separation, temporary custody, financial disclosure. The paper trembled in my hand. Marion looked down, silent. Ryan, standing near the door, turned away completely. Evan stepped forward only enough to say, "It's all documented." His tone was calm, polite, exactly as promised. I wanted to scream, to tell everyone it wasn't what it looked like, but no sound came. Cameras clicked. The envelope slipped from my fingers, papers fanning across the tile like evidence set free. Evan didn't pick them up. He just walked past me toward the exit, steady, finished, leaving the truth scattered at my feet.